Hey there, this is your pal Pally, and welcome back to Git Er Raid. I'm taking a look at PTR fights for the upcoming Siege of Orgrimmar. As always with PTR testing, the bugs will be plentiful and tuning will be off, so keep that in mind. I lost my hard drive last week, and thus missed putting together pieces for the guides for the last 3 encounters tested. I may do a summary of my impressions at some point soon, but let's keep going with the next fights that were baited. I got a chance to look at the Sha of Pride with a fairly organized group this time. It is, of course, a 2-tank fight, and likely 2 healable, although we were using 3 at the time. The fight has some ads running around, and then some neat mechanics, so let's dive into it. The fight revolves around a Cho'Gall-like personal counter called Pride. You'll get a little box in your UI that has your current Pride level. The goal is to minimize the Pride you accumulate during the fight. This obviously is rough in general, but you have to make sure you don't get high Pride or else the fight gets more difficult. And also at 100 Pride, you get mind controlled by the boss and run around killing your fellow raid members. While enjoyable if you really hate your raid, it will probably not be a good use of your time. The biggest thing to watch out for is what your Pride is at when the boss casts Swelling Pride. He'll do this when his energy hits 100, so that will happen at least 4 or 5 times during the course of the fight. You'll need to be aware of what your Pride is at, because he'll cause you to have to deal with a different mechanic depending on the level of your Pride. Let's go into that first before we talk about the rest of the fight, because it's very critical to downing this encounter, and everyone in the raid has to be responsible for their Pride. So remember, you have to deal with these mechanics whenever the boss casts Swelling Pride. So firstly, if your Pride is under 25, you're golden. There's nothing you have to deal with. Hooray! If you get past 25 Pride, but below 50, you will spawn a little void zone under your feet, and if you or anyone else is in that void zone after it explodes in 3 seconds, you take a decent chunk of damage and you gain 5 Pride. Just move away from the bad stuff and you are fine. If you have over 50 but under 75 Pride when the boss finishes his Swelling Pride cast, you will spawn a different looking void zone a short distance away from you called a projection. Your personal projection will have an arrow above it, and I know this is counter to what you think, you have to go stand in the void zone until it explodes, otherwise your entire raid takes a crap ton of damage. So watch for the Swelling Pride cast and then immediately look around for your projection pool and go stand in it. You have about 5 or 6 seconds to get there. It's not a raid wipe if someone misses their pool, but it really hurts, so everyone has to be responsible for finding their own pool. Lastly, if your Pride is above 75 but under 100, you will radiate out damage and Pride to anyone standing near you for a long period of time. Just basically stay away from people. It's hoped that you never get to this stage, but if you do, just make sure not to hit anyone. If you are at 100 Pride, it seems like you can instantly get MC'd, but at other times you have to wait for the Swelling Pride cast to get MC'd. It wasn't clear from all the polls we did how that exactly was working. But again, getting to that point is really bad, and if people are doing well to avoid Pride, then it shouldn't be worrisome. So how the heck do you gain this ever so hated Pride? Well, I'll explain the raid mechanics and all that, but by default, even if you're doing everything else perfect, the whole raid will gain at least 5 Pride every time the boss casts Swelling Pride, so it's inevitable that you'll have some. You just have to do well at the other portions of the fight. And let me take the time here to mention Nourishin. He is the big Mogu guy in the entrance to this room that helps you out during the encounter. He will be there doing a couple things, but realize that he gets killed at 30% of the boss's health, and thus begins the burn phase of the encounter. But back to the helpfulness of your big Mogu buddy. All throughout the fight, he will buff 3 random players with Gift of the Titans. It grants you immunity from gaining Pride for the most part. It's pretty darn helpful on its own, but even better, if those 3 players stack close to each other, they all gain a buff called Power of the Titans. This gives you a mini Bloodlust for 15 seconds, increasing your damage, healing, and haste by 25%. Bonus! It also will refresh over and over again as long as the 3 people are stacked together. So try to do it as much as possible while those 3 people have Gift of the Titans, and then they'll do a lot better for your entire raid. Putting a stack point or something is probably the best. In this video, the raid decided that stacking somewhere under the boss would be the best place, although that can complicate some other mechanics. Whatever works for you. Let me talk about the tanks and healers for a little bit, and then we'll finally go into the flow of the encounter. Tanks, you will taunt off for stacks of Wounded Pride. Essentially, if you don't, every subsequent melee hit by the boss will give you a bunch of pride. Best to avoid that and just taunt swap. You'll be doing this all fight and dealing with picking up a million ads, as you'll hear about in a few. Healers, besides the other mechanics, you have an extra source of pride, which is this debuff placed on a random raid member called Mark of Arrogance. It ticks for about 45k a second and will last the entire fight. It is dispellable, but hold your horses. If you dispel it, you get 5 pride as the dispeller. You have to think about that for a little bit. You can't just have one healer doing all of the dispels. You'll need to rotate it around, or maybe call out which healer has the lowest pride, and they'll get the next dispel. You could also heal through the debuff, but I'm not sure how well that will work out in the long run. Maybe in the burn phase that will help, but maybe not. Okay, let's get to the meat of the encounter and what's really going on. So the first thing coming out in the fight are the Reflection of Pride ads. You'll see a little purple mess around your feet where they are spawning. It is really important to make sure you move away from their spawn point, because if you get hit by it, not only will it do a decent chunk of damage, but you'll gain 5 pride. Also realize that as the encounter goes on, more and more of these ads spawn per cycle, so you might have to move multiple times to avoid the spawning of these ads. Fortunately, these ads don't hurt too much, but for the sake of killing them off quickly, they should be gathered up by a tank and then AoE or cleaved down. Around the time of these ads just dying off, the boss will cast Imprison. This is a huge source of pride and must be handled quickly. You see these 4 little platforms around the room? In 10-man, the back right and front left ones are used for this mechanic. I imagine in 25-man all of them will be used. But for now, the boss will place 2 raid members in these platforms, and for every few seconds the raid members are stuck there, they will take a bunch of damage and gain 5 pride. It can add up really, really quickly. So how do you free them? Well, you see those little glowing pieces of the platform? The ones that light up yellow are the ones that you can stand in. If you stand in both of the ones that are lit up, they will turn back to blue and your raid member will be instantly freed. So obviously your goal is to have people ready to stack in the glowy parts of the platforms immediately after people get imprisoned. But before you go thinking you're clever, you can't pre-stack on the platform pieces, as you'll get knocked off at the end of the imprisonment cast. As I said, this mechanic of the fight is a huge generator of pride, so you must be handled swiftly. Also, around the time you get people freed, another ad will spawn in the back of the room called the Manifestation of Pride. It does not need to be tanked, as it will simply sit there and cast Mocking Blast. This cast can and should be interrupted as much as possible. This ad is high priority too, as Mocking Blast will do some damage, but each time it hits, you guessed it, it adds 5 pride to whomever it hits. Blow it up quickly. The ad didn't seem to be CCable, but definitely keep the stuns and interrupts chained. One last thing on the manifestation. When it dies, it will give the 2 closest raid members 5 additional pride. So if you have to deal with that in some way with low pride people, do that, but it's probably not a huge deal. Once the manifestation dies, it will be about time for the Swelling Pride to be cast from the boss. So again, pay attention to your personal pride level and deal with whatever mechanic you need to. On top of that, Swelling Pride itself hits the raid for a huge chunk of health, so keep people topped off heading into that, and if you need to, use raid CDs. Finally, as I mentioned, your Mogu buddy will get killed off at 30%. You get all your pride wiped down to 0, and then the fight continues as normal. Except, the boss will be doing a huge AoE every 10 seconds that will do a bunch of damage to you, and gives you 5 pride. You burn him hard and do what you have to do to survive. You'll have to keep dealing with the adds and all the other mechanics, so I don't think it's a simple stack and burn phase, but we'll see how it turns out on live. So that's the fight for you in a nutshell. Keep your pride as low as possible, handle the imprisonments quickly, kill manifestations fast, and then deal with your own personal raid mechanic after swelling pride. Thanks for watching, and please comment, like, and/or subscribe to the video if you found it helpful, and have a good one!